Are they making more?
In the future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
Welcome to a brand new show here on UBN Network, Dr. Judy WTF. So this is our first show, folks, so you got to be a little gentle with us. And Judy, it is a pleasure and a thrill. We've been working on this for quite a while to be on air with you.
Quite a while, Walt. A lot of conversations, yes.
And the show is actually Dr. Judy WTF, Healing Human Disconnect, Be the Cause. Now, how did you come up with that?
Well, that is a lengthy conversation. I'll try to make it
the
framework of...
We've got some time.
Yeah, I know. Okay, fine. All right, I'll get right into it. Back in 2001, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and we were just chatting and talking about the state of the human race. And I started speaking in sort of metaphorical language that we've all fractured off into what I call isms. Religions, politics, different... races, so on. We're just a bunch of isms. And we looked at each other and we were just sort of upset about this human disconnect, if you will. And I said to my friend, isn't it time that we come together as a united humanity?
Well, I think that we're more disconnected now, as however you want to define that, a human race, a country, even a city, than ever.
We're extremely disconnected. And at that particular stage, I wanted to heal global disconnect. So I started creating an idea in my mind that I named Join the Human Race. And I wanted to create a system of healing global disconnect. So I started drawing. I like to go to restaurants and just take out a napkin or just draw on one of those paper tablecloths. And
don't you use the cloth napkins too?
Yeah, well, they get a little soggy after a while because I spill things and then it soaks up and it just doesn't look good. So
I hate it when that happens.
I know. So I started drawing this thing. I didn't know what it was, but it just sort of flowed out of me, and I did what I thought was the flow of life. The flow of life.
The flow of life.
The flow of life. Creation, destruction, paradigm shift, reintegration.
Okay.
That's how I see flow of life. We're created, and then we fall into entropy, and then we reorganize. Sometimes we bump up to a higher level.
And entropy means?
Entropy means chaos, that we try to organize, but organization will only go so far. And if structures are sustainable, they will stay organized longer. And if they're unsustainable, they will fall apart into chaos. So keeping these concepts in mind, I just started drawing because that's my thing. I like to draw. I've always liked to draw ever since I was a little girl.
I'm a better tracer than I am drawer.
Oh, I started there. I started with a trace. And so now I'm just flowing along and drawing this thing. So I draw a square, and I divide it into my favorite numbers, which is 333.
333.
333. Okay. So now I'm into my 333. It's just, I love the number 3. My birthday is on the 9th, and so 333, 9.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, as I'm drawing this thing, I start filling it in with concepts that I've always been in love with, scientific concepts like the Big Bang, DNA. I was a biology fiend. I just was always in love with biology. And so I started pulling from concepts from life. And as I started drawing, I noticed that the first panel was a creation panel.
Now, what we've got here is a mind map that you've done.
Yes.
And
yes.
For those of you that can see, we can put up the first panel, which is a mind map of 9 different panels.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. So as I started flowing through this mind map, I started thinking about the concept of how have we splintered into these isms? How have we fractured off from the concept of one soul, one human race? And so, having studied much spirituality over the course of the years, I started thinking about how we are one soul, and the white light is one light, but if you run it through a prism, it, of course, fractures off into the different colors.
Yes, it does. Now, when you say you've studied spirituality, because I know you're pretty well read in that, can you expand on that for a moment?
Yes, I studied many different forms of spirituality, including Kabbalah. I'm currently studying works by Paramahasa Yogananda, the Self-Realization Fellowship. I'm always interested in consciousness. I was born a Jew. I am much more interested in universal truth. I want to know where these different alignments take place. So when I read something from the Torah, I read something from the Bhagavad Gita, or I read something from the Zohar, the Kabbalah, I'm looking for the message, the resounding message. And the resounding message that seems to emerge all the time, all our messiahs are saying the same thing, which is that we come from one soul. We come from one soul. That the fact that we're fractured into many is an illusion. And once we can see that, once we can make that paradigm shift, that we are all interconnected, that we are all responsible for each other's, what I call bumping up to a higher level, meaning that if I'm down there and you can get me to a higher place because of some information that you can give to me that will help me grow, that's the way it goes. And if I can do the same for another human being, we're all that for somebody. We're all that.
That's a win-win.
Correct.
Now, when you say one soul, do you mean like source or soul?
Like we all come from the same, we're all part of an interconnected body, a universal source, a universal energy, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
We're all interconnected. We live on this planet. If you spill poison into the ocean, then that poison, depending on how diluted or non-diluted it is, it's going to float across to somebody else, and they're going to drink it.
Exactly.
And you're thinking, no big deal. Come on. Butterfly theory, right?
Yes.
A butterfly flaps its wings and tsunami occurs. That's just a kind of a metaphor for the fact that we're interconnected. So with this in mind, I traced the connection to the disconnection. So if you look at the mind map, you'll see that panel 1 is really the darkness and the light. So that represents the one soul, but then the concept of the fracturing of the one soul, which then spills out into panel 2, which is the actual where the lens cracks, where this fragmentation actually takes place. And then in panel 3, it's encoded. And then through that process, we have now created the problem. So let me go back to something a little bit more micro, because taking on global disconnect soon started feeling pretty large.
It's a lot to digest. We're going to have to bite this down.
And so I looked in the mirror, decided, look, I don't look like a messiah, so let's not go there today. Okay, we won't go there today.
So
we won't go there. So what I decided to do was I started applying it to my patients. As a licensed clinical psychologist,
yes,
I thought, look, if there is a flow, if there's some sense of a universal truth, then let me just follow the flow. So the flow, just in broad general strokes, it's again creation of the problem from the problem, dismantling of the problem through the dismantling of the problem to the paradigm shift into solutions. So creation, destruction, reintegration, from, through, to.
Okay,
so
from, through, to.
From, through, to.
Okay.
Right. So when my patients started coming in for their treatment, I started looking at this so-called problem that they were presenting as a from, through, to model. So thinking about the flow of creation, I started looking at my readings, and one of the things that I remember reading, and I actually write about in my book that I'm working on, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect, which is not out yet, which I'm really pushing to finish.
Right, you're what, 7/8 done?
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So stay tuned,
So-
folks.
Yeah, so one of the pieces of wisdom that I read was that everything that begins to exist has a cause.
Okay.
So in doing my work as a psychologist, I have been trained in many modalities to include behavior modification, which I applied many years ago through my stop smoking system, my habit breaker stop smoking system back in 1980. And then I started learning cognitive behavioral therapy. I started learning psychoanalytic therapy. I started learning about different systems. And I thought, each one of them is beautiful, but each one of them just seems to be a piece of the puzzle. And
Right.
what I wanted to do was I wanted the flow. I wanted to present something to my patients that will give them a mind map to healing. That's what I was interested in doing. I didn't want to just give them a symptom reduction. I didn't want to just...
Right, as a Band-Aid, you were actually trying to address the cause.
Correct.
So that,
Correct.
that they actually could go on living freer lives.
Correct.
As a clinical psychologist and also as a marriage, family, and child counselor, MFCC. So you're pretty experienced in and obviously have a full-time practice that's going gangbusters.
Yeah, it's always been my dream to have my patients be able to do what I teach them to do without me, because it's not fair for a professional to make that patient depend upon them.
I agree entirely.
So it's the concept. You can teach somebody you can give them fish,
Correct.
or you can teach them to fish. So
Teach
I
them
like
how
to
to fish,
teach
exactly.
them how to fish. So I'm giving them a system, and of course it takes a while for them to learn the language. And the mind map is the cliff notes. So that mind map, which took me about 12 years to develop, now it's in year number 12 of development, is a really, really quick way for people to know where they're at in the process, where they are tripping up in the process, where they're resistant in the process, and where they can go if they can just take that next step in the process.
Now, you call me all the time with a testimonial of sorts of patients you're working with.
Yeah.
Is there one that comes to mind that's saying, hey, they had this challenge and they're doing great after a few sessions?
Yeah, I have to say the children do really, really wonderfully well. I'm going to get into it deeper because it takes some laying down of the system for people to understand, because my personal pet peeve is when I'm misunderstood. So I really want to lay it out so clearly so that if you take a piece of it, it's like, oh, Dr. Judy, are you nuts? No. But if you look at it in its entirety, if you look into the entire grid, so to speak, of the system, then you will see that actually if you go through the system in order, meaning panel 1 across to panel 3, 1, 2, 3 across, 4, 5, 6 across, 7, 8, 9 across. Okay, so you asked me a great question. So an example of something, I'll give you the end result and then we'll backtrack it in terms of how we arrived at that particular. So before I do that, let me just say a few things so that everyone listening can be clear on how I apply it to the micro process of healing human disconnect. Again, comes from my desire to heal global disconnect. I have not forgotten about this.
That's a pretty big, lofty goal, Doctor.
Well, look, I'm a child of the 60s. I'm a John Lennon lover. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer. I'm not the only one. So he and many others before him started the consciousness of unconditional love, started the consciousness of unity. So this is really born out of the consciousness, because if you look at panel 1, what panel 1 truly represents is light consciousness versus dark consciousness. When you're in a certain consciousness, it's like a domino. If you put your mindset in a certain consciousness, then the flow from that consciousness is going to bring you a certain outcome. If you're in the light consciousness, and what I mean by light is, right now we'll use the word universal truth. When you're in the truth consciousness, what flows out of that is interconnection, reconnection, and unity. When you're in the dark consciousness, what flows from that is chaos isms, which in shorthand means defense mechanisms,
Yes.
or fracture of the human race isms, okay? Literally race isms. And then you end up with a clash of the isms.
Well, I think in a classic example with the George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin issue that's hit lately, it is just magnifying itself amazingly. It's huge.
Absolutely. And one of the fun things that we're going to be doing on this show, which we've discussed a lot, is we're going to apply the mind map to current events. I can't wait.
We're going to turn events, and we're going to do current songs. You guys have ever heard of Name That Tune? Well, we're going to do Psych That Tune. So we're going to take a current song. We've had a lot of fun with this, and then go through the lyrics and apply the mind map, and it's amazingly enlightening and a lot of fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun. So I just want to get back to a patient that I recently saw. It's a mother-daughter team. Okay, so the little girl comes in. A typical complaint for little girls is separation anxiety.
Yeah.
And mothers will often...
Now, who has the separation anxiety? Is that the mom or the daughter or the kid?
Maybe both, okay. But the little girl typically will not want to go to school, especially at the beginning of the school year. She'll freak out. She'll want to cling to mother. She'll sometimes end up regressing and urinating in her pants at school. It's very embarrassing. So what I do is I look at the symptoms not as such. I look at symptoms as hieroglyphics that point to the cause. Remember, whatever begins to exist has a cause. So
Correct.
Why is she behaving this way? I don't go to the genetics model. I don't default to that model. That's the last place I go, because that model doesn't give us any power. It doesn't allow us to be the cause. It doesn't allow us to take responsibility for being the cause of the outcome of our lives.
So that's definitely not empowering.
It's not an empowering model. Yeah. Not that it isn't valid at times. Certainly genetics has its place in our humanity. But in terms of cause, it's not an empowering place to start. Okay, so in comes a little girl. She's crying, separation anxiety. So what I do is I'm looking for human disconnect.
Okay.
And I'm looking for human disconnect because after so many years of doing work as a psychologist, I've discovered that psychopathology is based on some form of a disconnection.
And for those of you that just tuned in, folks, I should let you know we are tuned in to Dr. Judy WTF with clinical psychologist Judy Rosenberg, and welcome aboard. So, and we're here to heal human disconnect.
Yes, and the very first disconnect that we experience in life is, I'll let you answer that question.
We're born, right?
Yeah, we're born. We're physically disconnected from our birth mothers. We are born. The umbilical cord gets snipped.
That's it.
Oftentimes too early. It's tragic that we don't let the umbilical cord throb. We don't allow, in many instances, I think we're getting wiser and wiser, we don't follow nature and let the baby rest on the mother's belly and crawl up to her nipple or be placed on her nipple. Everything happens so quickly.
Yes.
Kid gets put under the heater and the umbilical cord gets snipped, and they don't really... I've noticed that typical hospital procedures don't necessarily align with the nurturing aspect of fostering the connection right away.
Well, it's a pretty sterile place.
It's very sterile. That's correct. So the first disconnect is mother-infant disconnect. Okay. So I go straight to attachment theory. I love John Bowlby. John Bowlby, father of attachment theory. What a brilliant man. So John Bowlby says that the way we attach to our primary caregiver is the blueprint for our mental health.
Okay.
And this makes great sense to me. For example, I have two beautiful dogs, Sophie and Simon, love of my life dogs. I've got a lot of love of my life dogs, but these are the now love of my life dogs. They're chocolate labradoodles. They're great. They adore each other, constantly nourishing each other. So,
and if you ever read her book, Lucid of Darkness, Simon is a huge, huge star in the book.
Of course. So what I notice with my dogs is that one is pretty neurotic, and she's always just kind of shaking, and she's always needing to jump and get attention. And the other one's more of a chill pill. Simon's the chill pill. Sophie's a little bit neurotic. Okay, so why? What's the cause? Well, I got Sophie at 3 months old. I got Simon at 5 months old. Simon had 5 months of breastfeeding with his mom. Sophie only had 3.
Okay.
So
and in dog years, no, just
right,
kidding.
In dog years. Okay. so again, if we follow the nature, if we follow the nature of the animal kingdom, we as a human race would be a healthy human race, but we don't do that. We suffer from human disconnect, which makes us go symptomatic. So going back to the little girl, what I do is I look for the disconnect. And so here's what I want. I want to preface what I'm going to say next, because I could just feel it coming on. I could feel it coming on. When the infant and the mother disconnect too soon and not in the right dosage, what it leaves the child with is the incapacity to self-soothe. When a child cannot self-soothe, a newborn baby does not know how to self-soothe. So if a newborn baby is placed in an incubator, or if a 2-month-old baby or a 6-month-old baby or an 8-month-old baby is placed in childcare and is away from mom for too long, that's just too long.
Right.
So attachment theory talks about the fact that we need to attach to a primary caregiver. It doesn't matter if it's not the biological mom. That's not the point. It could be the dad. It could be the grandma. But the point is that during the first phase of life, that baby needs a primary caregiver to attach to that's consistent. So here are the ingredients to making a cake, right? You need flour, yeast, water, eggs, whatever.
Right. And
stevia, I was going to say sugar, but no.
Truvia. And if you put too much of one ingredient or not enough another, or bake it too long.
Yeah. So
it's a mess.
So in order to have a healthy psyche, what you need is human connection. So if that connection is severed, that leaves a wound. It leaves an opening whereby I call them psychological viruses can start attacking.
Okay, psychological viruses.
Right. So if you look at panel 1, you see the light and then you see the darkness. The darkness is a metaphor for human disconnect, mother-infant disconnect. So at that particular phase, there is an opening for a wound to flow in, and I call them infiltrations. Babies soak in through the eyes of their mother, and what they soak in is their self-definition, because they do not know who they are. They are developing,
right.
So they're sponges. Right. So they sponge in. They get infiltrated by the energy, the nurturance, or lack thereof, of mother. Mother meaning primary caregiver. If the caregiver is inconsistent, if the caregiver is emotionally absent, if the caregivers are too many and too varied, then the child doesn't have what Bowlby, John Bowlby, father of attachment theory, calls secure attachment. And those children who are insecurely attached are my future patients. They are the future patients. Why? Because they don't know how to calm themselves down. They don't know how to thermostatically stabilize their emotions. They don't know what to do when they get upset. They flail around. They need the skin contact. They need the eye contact. They need what is called the mirroring.
Well, I'm all for skin contact and eye contact.
Yep. Well, so are those newborns. You and those newborns, Walt. You have a lot in common. So.
And if you want to send us anything in the email list, you can email us at info@drjudywtf.com, or we're also on Facebook at Dr. Judy WTF and Twitter, Dr. Judy WTF.
Okay, so to continue with the flow of the mind map, there was a human disconnect between this little girl and the mother. Let's say mom had to go back to work. It's not her fault.
Right.
She needed the money. She
Right,
didn't
exactly.
know. So now the little 3 or 4 or 5 month old little girl is with grandma. and mom comes back at 5 o'clock in the evening,
Right.
and there's been this huge time span. Children, babies in particular, can't be told, see you later, be back home soon.
Yeah.
They don't get the
It's a
concept.
large chasm of disconnect.
Correct.
Yeah.
So what happens is that the wound in panel 1 starts manifesting as a splintered lens. It's almost like the soul, the psyche, has been shattered. There's a disconnect, and there's a shattering to a greater or lesser degree, depending on the damage. So panel 1 is the wound, panel 2 is the reaction to the wound, and then panel 3 is the encoding of the wound into the fiber of the person's being. And that's where we form our core beliefs about ourselves, both positive and negative. So what happens is that the wound from panel 1 becomes infiltrated into the fiber of our being and gets encoded. By panel 3, it's encoded into thoughts, behaviors, patterns that then form the fiber of our being.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, is there an approximate age when the migration or the development of to panel 3?
Yes. According to developmental psychology, we need our mothers for at least the first 2 to 3 years of life, and less so. In other words, a newborn can't be away from mom for any amount of time.
Right.
A 1-month-old maybe for an hour or two, 2-month-old maybe an hour or two, like this, and so on. So it just becomes this spread. Now, if you interrupt the flow of that schedule, of the nature schedule, what happens is that the child, again, doesn't know to manage his or her emotions. So it reacts, and it starts forming unconscious and later more and more conscious impressions of him or herself, which then become encoded into a core belief. Now, if the core belief is negative, like some of the people that come see me have core beliefs like, I'm not important, I'm not lovable,
I'm not worthy.
I'm not worthy.
Right.
Okay? So these core beliefs that then encode become the lens through
Right.
which they see life. And then they gather evidence. So it's almost like they have the darkness on the inside, and then they gather the evidence from the outside to bolster their case that indeed they're not lovable. So now they're in what I've termed the double dungeon.
A double dungeon.
The double dungeon. They are dark on the inside, and then they hologram it out to the outside. The outside feeds them. It's the feeding system for their negative core belief, and then they're trapped in the double dungeon. I'll get a lot more detailed about that.
Well, what I say is a lot of people do is they compare their worst to everybody else's best. And, of
Yes.
course, everybody else is putting out a front of their best, not knowing, of course, they might be in a double dungeon. So we all do it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So this is the formation of the problem. So now, if you look at the mind map, then you can see how's the problem created. Panel 1, the wound or the disconnect. Panel 2, the manifestation and the reaction to the wound. Panel 3, the encoding of the wound into the fiber of your being. So that's the formation of the problem. So now people come in not after the problem's formed, but they come in during panels 4, 5, 6. 4, 5, 6 is the chaos and the entropy piece of it. So panel 4 represents the core encoding of the fiber of the person's being, which is now out of integrity because it's not a healthy encoding, and it then falls apart. It's kind of like a bad structure. It's like a bad building.
Because there's no foundation.
No
of,
foundation.
Of substance.
Right. Okay. So take an exaggerated form of a child that was left to the curb and was not nurtured, nourished in any way, shape, or form. They do not have the emotional ingredients to do life. So that by the time life shakes the tree of their being, they collapse.
Well, they're pretty shaken at that point.
They're pretty shaken. So what happens is they collapse into chaos, because they're wounded in panel 1, and they then go into panel 5, which is called defense mechanisms. And because they're so wounded and they're so confused now and they're so chaotic in their life structure, they defend against the wound.
Right. Well, that's what they know, and that's
chaos.
what they're comfortable with, if you will, and so they're gonna bolster it,
Right.
build it up,
Right.
protect
So-
it.
Correct. So panel 5 is symptoms. So how do they defend against a wound? How do you defend against emotional pain? How do you defend against what I call the hole in the soul?
Hole in the soul.
It's hole in the soul. Okay, so now they have to defend that core pain, that and well, you have to understand, when I work with people and I get to the core belief system,
Right.
there's when we, meaning the patient, and I know that we're there, it's a very, very tough, very, very intimate and very painful emotional experience to arrive at the core belief, and it's like a knife through their heart, and that's why I call it the hole in the soul. It's the original wound. So when that original wound is struck, it penetrates, and there's a lot of emotional pain around that. So what people do is they will live in panel 5 defense mechanisms because they don't want to expose that wound.
Well,
So
they don't want to experience that much pain, even
No,
though in
no.
many instances going through that, you get better and eventually cure the pain.
Right. So panel 5 really is the hatched version of the infiltration. By then it's gotten out of control. So what's panel 5? Alcoholism, the isms, any kind of using substances, overeating, using sex to masturbate away the pain. That could be a defense mechanism. Anything that has to do with avoiding the pain, numbing the pain, displacing the pain away and off of the self. These are the defense mechanisms.
Because we as humans go more toward pleasure and away from pain, obviously.
Right. So our pleasure then becomes our defense mechanism, right?
Exactly.
And we think that we're doing well because we're shielded, but actually our defense mechanisms, because they are unhealthy, eventually break us down, which brings us to panel number 6, Clash of the Isms. This is where the breakdown occurs. And so people come to me in panel 5, Dr. Judy, I have a problem. Well, what's the problem? I overeat. Okay, great. You've just told me your defense mechanism. Now we're going to go to cause. What do you mean? Aren't you just going to help me to lose weight and go on a diet and maybe suggest how to behavior modify my eating and thought stop my impulses? No, we're not going to do that. We're going to go to cause. Well, what's that? We're going to look at the original wound, because if we go with the symptom management technique, the whole thing is going to be temporary.
Right.
It's not a paradigm.
It's not going to last.
It's not a paradigm shift. Okay. So again, once the person comes in with their symptom, then we have a chance, if the symptom is painful enough for them to be interested and motivated to break through and break down their defense mechanisms. Sometimes people will come to me when they're in panel 6, meaning that they're either imploding, which is one form of breakdown, or exploding.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And
So-
we're gonna in a few minutes we're gonna go over a classic example that's in the news this very day. An actress that has really come on the scene and exploding and imploding at the same time.
Yes. Yep. So when people break down, you have to understand that people, just for exaggerated purposes, there are 2 exaggerated types of implosions and explosions. Do you want to guess what the implosion version of the most radical form of implosion would be?
I'm afraid you're going to have to enlighten us here.
Okay. Suicide.
Suicide. Well, that's a
Suicide.
temporary problem to a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Right. That's
Yep.
implosion when you do yourself in.
Okay.
You're imploding. What's the opposite of suicide?
Well, you shoot somebody else.
Correct. So
Right.
we've got the energy of the ism, which is the defense mechanism, breaks
Okay.
down eventually, and it'll break down in an exaggerated form in some cases into suicide, homicide, or Homicide, suicide.
Right. Where
Right?
They kill them and then themselves.
Yeah. Okay. So they
But
can't.
isn't that good? They come out of the gene pool?
Well, they're out of the double dungeon at that point.
True.
They've killed off the darkness within themselves, and they've killed off the darkness within others.
And maybe the
so,
source of their darkness.
Yeah, I mean, they think they have, right? And they
Yes.
have, in a strange sense, they have, because
Yes.
there's no more problems after that. Can't treat a dead person, right? Okay.
That's right.
So that's the end game. So from a macro point of view, you can only imagine what that means from a macro point of view is the end of the human race. Okay, so that when we have a big clash of the isms, meaning that America is warring with this country, is warring with that country, and we fractured off into these isms, then the end game there is annihilation.
Right. And
Okay.
then some believe there's a certain religious faction that their goal is want to annihilate everybody else.
Yeah. Okay. So that's one path. The other path is to go back to the cause and expunge, so to speak, because remember, infants are sponging in.
Yes, they are. I call them, they're sponges and little scientists.
They're sponges. So they're sponging in the pathology of the parent. And the good stuff also. I don't want
Yes.
to leave that out, okay? So they're sponging in the good, they're sponging in the bad, but now we're talking about the darkness. So they're sponging in the darkness that their parent has sponged in from their parent, whose parent has sponged from their parent. So these infiltrations are multi-generational. So if you bust the game now with that child, right? Then you've busted the game for the next generation. So going back to the little girl and the mother, what I do in my treatment, and I will get very detailed about it because it's not as obvious as it looks, is that we go back to the cause and we heal the mother-infant disconnect. And the reason kids are out of my therapy office quickly is because I do prepare the mother for the healing process. I do prepare the child for the healing process. And this disconnect can be healed by reconnecting and healing that wound.
If you just tuned in, folks, welcome. We are listening to Dr. Judy Rosenberg on Dr. Judy WTF, and we haven't even gotten the WTF part yet.
That's right.
We're just laying some groundwork.
That's right. A lot of groundwork.
Right here on the Universal Broadcasting Network. So thanks for tuning in. And if you have any queries or questions, or down the road, we're going to take call-ins. info@drjudywtf.com. So, you know, many times, because my sister's a psychologist, and of course she's a child psychologist. So a parent will bring a kid in, and the parent will want the kid fixed.
Right.
And she's always saying it's not the kid's problem; it's the parent's problem or cause.
That's right. So I want to spell out very clearly that we, as human beings, are not the cause of the first part of our life. We're not the cause of part 1, chapter 1, because we are, again, sponges. We're taking in what our parents give us. But we are the cause of part 2. We are responsible to heal ourselves. We're responsible to heal our own pathology so we don't pass down the dis-ease to the next generation, that we don't project our dis-ease onto other people, that we don't hurt other people because we're hurt, because that's how it goes. When we're hurt, we hurt others. It's our responsibility. We need to be the cause.
Are you trying to tell me that I need to take responsibility for what I do?
No, not you.
Oh,
Walt.
good. Okay,
everybody
good.
else.
I was just checking.
Not you.
Good. Okay, I feel better already.
You're exempt. Okay.
Thank you, doctor.
You're welcome. I knew I could help.
Great. So, and it's true. I mean, who hasn't heard, blaming others, not taking responsibility? It's my parents' fault. It's, my dad was an alcoholic.
Right,
whatever.
and I want to clarify something. A lot of people think that the work that I do is all about blaming and shaming and guilting the parents. Well, no, it's not. It's not about blame, shame, guilt. It's about seeing the disconnected cause, seeing it and healing it, and understanding that part of the process is to take the onus off of the self. Part 1, which is taking the onus off of the self and saying, wait a minute, I wasn't born with low self-esteem. I wasn't born with the core belief that I'm worthless. It came from somewhere.
Absolutely.
So that has to be addressed.
It's not like anybody's born with stamped on their forehead, I'm not worthy or I'm worthless.
No.
I definitely came from somewhere.
Definitely.
Precisely.
So we have to go, what I call it is, we have to go and we have to take out these negative infiltrations, and we have to put it back from the place that it came from. We have to put it back to that place.
And one of the funny things you've mentioned is, which I think is hilarious, is childhood is the ultimate hostage situation.
Yeah, that's true. And we either have benevolent parents or not such benevolent parents, or usually combination thereof. And again, not a blame and a shame model, but more a real truth recognition that we take on our parents' infiltrations. And until we break the unconscious the unconscious drive to continue this pattern, we will continue the pattern.
Right, it's unconscious and we don't know we're doing it. And
That's
we
right.
find out we do it, and it's like, why do I do that?
Yeah, precisely.
Even though that pint of ice cream I ate last night was delicious.
Really?
Oh, yeah, it was great.
Panel 5, defense mechanisms. Very nice, Walt.
Thank you.
That's one of my favorites, food.
Oh,
Defense mechanism, food. A good one. Especially Haagen-Dazs.
Yeah, but,
Coffee,
you know,
ice cream.
I'm too lazy to put in a bowl, so, you know,
Yeah.
it's just easier to eat out of and all of a sudden the whole thing's gone.
Of course.
Hate when that happens. So we've got about 10 minutes left, and you want to go over an example of what we're talking about?
Yeah, I want to use the Amanda Bynes example.
Amanda Bynes.
I really, really do. I just want to say something to everybody out there listening. What was very interesting to me is that when we were talking about this show, Walt and I were talking about the show, Walt picked the song, the intro song, which I love.
It's actually one of the main songs from the original movie, the first one of The Matrix.
Right, and I didn't quite understand why he picked The Matrix, although I love the song, love the movie. So, of course, I went online because I'm always looking for interconnections. I'm always looking for coincidences. And we
didn't even talk about the song. I picked it, just was by happenstance. I picked up the CD just recently and was listening to it, and I thought, okay, that's the song. And I thought from a mind map, just subconsciously, The Matrix.
Well, I was fascinated by that because I went online and I started Googling the word matrix, and what I found was that matrix is a grid. And
Yes.
a grid is, each part of the grid is loaded with significant information. And I thought, wow, how perfect is that? Because the matrix is a grid, the mind map is a grid, each panel is loaded with information, each panel is a metaphor for information. I use these metaphors in different ways depending on how the therapy flows. And I just thought, wow, Walt, are you intuitive or what?
Well, if those of you who haven't actually seen, and you can get away just seeing the first movie of The Matrix, it's just loaded with information and philosophies and whatnot. It's a powerful, powerful movie.
Yes. So I was just fascinated with that coincidence, and so yes, I think why not? You've been listening to the lay of the land. I didn't get to panel 7, 8, 9. I want to get to it at a different point in time. But 7, 8, 9 is actually the paradigm shift. When you go back to cause and you clear out the infiltrations, you no longer have to repeat 4, 5, 6 chaos, defense mechanisms, and clash of the isms, but you can actually have a paradigm shift to interconnection, which is in panel 7, reconnection, which is panel 8 if you look at the mind map, and panel 9, which is unity.
So are you saying that if we go through this process, that life actually can get easier?
Life can get conscious. Life can become a choice point for everyone. We can start looking at things as we are the outcome of the cause of our lives, and we can start looking at the encoding that we inherited from our parents and dismantle the encoding that's gone wrong and recode ourselves. We need to recode ourselves.
And that's part of the reason why there's so much disconnect in the world?
Yes, we're disconnected because the blueprint is disconnected. The mother infant or the primary caregiver infant is disconnected. So now we have a world of cell phones and computers, and rather than go on a date, we go on a virtual date. Instead of going over to your friend's house, you Skype your friend. Not that that's terrible if your friend lives far away, but
Yeah.
again, we're acting as if we're super connected, global connection, and in a sense we are. But look at the movie. There's a movie, Disconnect. I ran to see the movie Disconnect because I thought, are they on the same topic that I'm on? And yeah, they are. It was a movie about.
So even though
computers.
we feel we're being more connected with all this technology, and in reality we aren't.
No, we're not.
No, I agree. We're not.
Cell phones, texting, sexting, Skyping.
Yeah,
I don't know. We're just,
There's a mayor going on race right now with a lot of sexting going on. It's just unbelievable.
Right. So so it's rampant now, and we're hurting from it because all people really want is the eye contact. We're back to I want eye contact. I want skin contact. I want the most powerful healing force on the planet, which all our messiahs came to deliver the message of, is unconditional love, the most powerful healing force on the planet. And to a baby, unconditional love means unconditional responsiveness of the mother to the baby.
So
baby
you keep talking
first,
about a lot about
first.
the mom. So
yes.
in the
or
parents,
caregiver, primary
I understand
caregiver.
primary caregiver, but
yes.
you're saying more of the emphasis and the weight of it, of the raising of the child early on in the infancy, is more mom than dad.
Could be dad.
Could be dad.
See, yeah, it could be dad. Maybe mom's a super earner and she decides to go out to the workforce, but then dad has to be the one that's primary caregiver. See, it has to be one primary caregiver.
Right.
Okay, so since mom has the breasts and the breast milk, it's a good idea if
Kinda works.
she's it, okay? But if it's not that, then it's the dad that needs to do the consistency. And so when parents are fracturing off the children to daycare and other types of care and they're not consistent,
so
that's a human disconnect.
So the fact that I wasn't breastfed as a child probably explains a lot of things.
Everything.
Oh,
now I know.
So Amanda Baines is an actress who's been acting out lately. In fact, she just did what they did is a 5150 psychiatric hold. And what is that?
Okay, 5150 is, I forget the numbers now. I think it's a 24-hour hold.
24-hour hold.
Yeah, and then
72
it rolls
hour.
over to 72-hour
Well,
hold.
they're
I
now
forgot
trying to
the
do 2
numbers.
weeks. But what she did was she went and she allegedly set fire to a California neighbor's driveway along with her own clothing, prompting a forced psychiatric evaluation. The troubled actress, 27, lit a blaze in the front of a small house in Thousand Oaks around 8:40 Monday, and it was an old lady's house that she didn't even know.
Right.
Earlier in the year, she threw a bong out of a 36-story window in Manhattan, claiming she never smoked.
Okay, so let's take the mind map as our grid, and
Okay.
let's analyze that. Okay, so let's work backwards. Let's look at her symptoms. Let's look at her acting out behavior, which is her clash of the isms, which is her setting herself on fire, acting out, and she pulled up into the driveway of a little old lady in Thousand Oaks,
Yes.
which is her old neighborhood.
Yes.
And she set herself on fire, and she had a can, I believe, of gasoline next to her.
Some I don't know, some type of fire.
Right.
Causing
right.
implement,
Okay, so
yeah.
she was trying to implode. Okay, now look at Amanda Bynes in panel number 6. She's trying to off herself. She's trying to implode. Now, she also has some interesting quotes that I researched last
Yes.
night. You want to read those? Go ahead.
Let's see. My parents are almost 70 years old. We are no longer on speaking terms. I would rather they be homeless than live off my money.
Okay. And go ahead. There's some other
let's see.
quote there.
Leave me alone, my ugly mom. So, I mean, which one's you driving on? Is it?
Yeah. Leave me alone, my ugly mom.
Yeah, actually twittered that. My mom is ugly and old and desperate for my attention, she wrote on Mother's Day. Leave me alone. That was it.
Okay, so let's just take that because what I do in my therapy is I take the symptoms, I take the acting out, and then I look for the cause. So what does she do? She takes herself and parks herself in the driveway of a little old lady. Do you see the parallel? Old, ugly mom.
Yes.
She parks herself in the driveway of an old lady in Thousand Oaks, which is the place that she grew up. So instead of confronting her mom directly about the she can't because the wounds are so unconscious, she then displaces her anger on the old lady in Thousand Oaks, and she displaces her anger inside herself. So she's now imploding and she's exploding.
Right. She's doing a number to herself and obviously a metaphor for her mom.
And she's not dealing with cause.
No, she's just acting out.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
So, folks, we're out of time. The clock is a tyrant, you know. We have been listening to Dr. Judy WTF. Hope you've learned a few things. We're just getting started. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to take call-ins. And I think what we're going to close out with is one of Judy's favorite songs, Because of You. Congratulations. You survived our first hour.
In the future, talk radio will actually